Well, we have a fourth question in the chat box. Let me read it out. And if any of the current panelists or speakers wants to chip in and answer, that would be great. So our last question is, how can policymakers ensure that young people have a meaningful voice in the decision-making processes related to the SDGs? Nirvana, Stavroula, or Eleni? Yeah.
Yes, I can reply for my opinion, and I totally understand the question why it exists, because it's difficult. It's actually difficult, I think. But maybe ensuring that young people have a meaningful voice in decision-making processes requires policymakers to create an enabling environment that encourages their participation, and maybe create spaces for youth participations. Policymakers can create spaces like youth forums, roundtables, consultations, or involve youth in policy making, can involve young people in the processes of policy making by including them in working groups and task forces, and by inviting them to participate in relevant meetings and events. Yes, this is my thought for now.
Okay, great. Nirvana, would you like to add anything?
Yes, maybe I can add that this is true in democratic countries, like before. As part of decision-making process is the public consultations. Usually civic society organizations and non-profit participate in this process to discuss any policy or law, legislation, before its adoption by the parliaments. However, I believe that at least in Bulgaria, but in many other countries, young people somehow are not encouraged enough to participate in policy making or decision making, or they're somehow really a part of politics. They do, even many young people do not go and vote on elections. So we need, as youth organization, maybe to work further. And one of the topics of my foundation is also this, to speak about our democracy as a structure and policy making, and how young people can contribute to that. And when they feel like confident that they know how to deal with these processes, then they actually can have this meaningful voice in really important matters like the Sustainable Development Goals. Because now when some countries go through different crises, as I gave the example with Bulgaria, like the politicians have really short-term viewpoint. I mean that they care more about what we're going to do this year, about to the end of the year or the next 2-3 years. They do not think about with a perspective. What we're going to do in 10 years, where we want to be. And sometimes they go away from the sustainable development because of the political crisis. But young people are those who will be there in 10 years, who wants to see the results. And actually, we can only motivate them, educate them to participate fully in the decision-making processes. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nirvana. Eleni, do you want to add anything?
I have some things to add. Everything that the speakers have said, I completely agree with. But I'm also I'm thinking about that policymakers, as I said before. For me, education and awareness raising is extremely important, because policymakers can educate people about not only the SDGs but and their importance, but about everything, about gender equality, about climate change, about everything that has been going on in the recent years, and just raise awareness about the decision-making processes related to them. And I believe that policymakers can also be inclusive, and diversity can ensure that, and like policymakers can ensure that young people from diverse backgrounds, different genders, including those who are marginalized, have a seat at the table and that their voices are heard. I think it's extremely important that if policymakers can achieve these two, then young people will start making more easy, they can be in the process of decision making and begin to understand what is going on around the world.
I completely agree. Thank you so much, Eleni.